freedom pass from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dream some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. From the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all. So with deep appreciation for the blessings of freedom that we know in this wonderful country of ours, I'm Dr. George Simon, welcoming you to another edition of Character Matters. This is the program where we talk about what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, the character crisis that much of the world finds itself in and is responsible for so many of the problems that we experience today. We have a country that was founded on a principle, a very unique principle, of individual liberty to the max. Minimal government intrusion into the lives of people, minimal interference from any outside imposing entity, all predicated on the premise that decent people with their own internal moral compass, decent people, if left alone, will naturally tend to innovate, will naturally tend to fend for themselves, to prosper, and to take care of one another, to help each other. It's all founded on that. It's all founded on that premise. And for a while, it worked, and then it didn't work. It hasn't always worked. This country hasn't always been a great country. There have been times in our history where we rightfully needed to hang our heads in shame because we did some really, collectively, we did some really horrendous things. There were still people of decent character among us, but too many of us allowed too much to happen that was beyond the pale. And so there are some dark times in our history, but there are also some glorious times, times when we found our greatness, times when collectively we were a people of great character because individually we were populated by individuals of solid character. Now, it takes a lot to do that. It takes a lot of foundation to build the kind of society, to build the kind of culture, to enhance the kinds of traditions that foster and promote and reward and encourage positive character development. And not too recently, not too recently, we had a period of unprecedented greatness. We paid some dear prices to get there, lost many lives in war. But through it all, we showed the nobility of our character. And unfortunately, the character pendulum has swung the other way in recent years. And we find ourselves in the midst of what I like to call a character crisis. And it affects everything we do. It affects every single thing we do. It touches every aspect of our lives. And we simply have to turn it around. Or the very fabric of this great and free enterprise that we call America will fray irreparably. So I do my part by writing about character issues because I consider them to be, the defining issue of our time. And I write about these issues in my books, In Sheep's Clothing, Understanding and Dealing with Manipulative People, which is the international bestseller. And to this day, after nearly 20 years and many revisions, to this day still the definitive work on understanding and dealing with manipulative people. And then my other book, Character Disturbance, The Phenomenon of Our Age, talking about the various varieties of disturbed and disordered characters that you're likely to encounter in your life and the kinds of problems that they're likely to cause and how you'll likely have to deal with those problems and how to recognize trouble early on, how to get the appropriate kind of help, how to intervene as best you can, how to maximally empower yourself in the interactions that you'll have with persons of impaired or deficient character. And then lastly, my book for the Christian faith community, The Judas Syndrome. A book about how genuine faith, not professed faith, genuine faith, what we really believe in our hearts, what we really hold to be true, values and ideals that we really honor, not what we say, but what we actually hold dear. How that can save us, truly save us, from our baser selves and make of us decent people. And how we betray ourselves. We betray ourselves and our lack of faith when we behave in a manner that reflects poor character. So that's what the Judas Syndrome is about. So I have In Sheep's Clothing, Character Disturbance, and the Judas Syndrome. More books to come. I'll be making some announcements in coming weeks about books and workshops and seminars. I know I've been touting the seminar, video webinar issue for several months and promising that information would show up on the blog about it. But the details of the workshops and how they're going to be turned into downloadable videos and available as webinars has not yet been completely worked out. But we're getting there. And I will definitely have some word for you soon about that. I'll also have up on my website and blog my calendar of planned appearances. So stay tuned. There'll be more information about that as the weeks go on here. And I mentioned my blog. It's at www.manipulative-people.com. That's manipulative-people.com, where you'll find timely articles about not just manipulative people, but all kinds of things related to character issues, how to deal with those folks in your life that make you crazy. You know something is wrong with them. Somehow they make you think there's something wrong with you. Their self-centeredness, their egotism, their sense of entitlement, their narcissism is impossible to live with. Dealing with them at work is a nightmare. They engage in all types of behavior, from backstabbing to undermining to playing get back to all kinds of manipulative behaviors. These are the people with character disturbances that I write about in my books, and I have written hundreds of articles on various timely topics related to dealing with such folks. And what to do if you find yourself in a relationship with these folks, whether you're married to the person, in some kind of other relationship, maybe they're a relative of yours, maybe you have to work with this person as a co-worker, or maybe even the person is your boss. At any rate, they can make life miserable. And on manipulative-people.com, you'll find timely articles, many articles that will give you the tools that you need to deal with this problem effectively and empower yourselves in your relationship with these nefarious characters. And you'll also find information on my website, www.drgeorgesimon.com. That's drgeorgesimon.com. You'll find information there as well. I also write for another blog called Psychology, Philosophy, and Real Life. That's Psychology, Philosophy, and Real Life at counselingwith2lsresource.com. That's counseling resource, all one word, but counseling with two L's. Counselingresource.com, www.counselingresource.com. So literally hundreds of articles out there that will clue you into what's up with the disturbed characters in your life and how to deal with them more effectively and empower yourself in your relations with them. I'm back live in front of the mic tonight, so I'm anxious to take your calls. If you have a situation that you're dealing with that you want some helpful tips about, maybe there's a disturbed character in your life. Maybe you're dealing with a narcissist or a covertly aggressive individual, a Class A manipulator. Maybe you're dealing with a bully. Whatever the case may be, whatever kind of disordered or disturbed character you're dealing with, and you're wanting some helpful hints, you can give us a call. If you want to share a story, you can give us a call as well. If you want to ask any questions at all, maybe you've read some or all of one or more of my books. Maybe you have read one or two of the articles, or maybe more, and you still have some questions. Happy to answer them for you, and more than happy to take your call. So the number to call is 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. Well, what a week this has been for me. I paid little attention to the news this week because I was traveling for the last 11 days pretty solidly. And I I enjoyed a lot of the time outdoors, biking some trails, seeing some friends that I hadn't seen in 50 years, visiting family and other friends, especially enjoying my time with my family members, my extended family members. So I just want to let you know that it feels good to be back and to be back live and to be able to take your calls. So if you have a question to ask or you have something you'd like to share, give us a call at 718-717-8296. And as I mentioned, because I was gone and because my schedule was pretty tight, even as I was, quote, on vacation, end quote, I didn't pay that much attention to the news, but those things that did catch my eye were really telltale. In the political arena especially, you almost can't make up the stuff that you read. And as listeners to this program know, I don't get into the politics of things. But I sure do like the endless parade of characters that we see in the political arena, because they tell us so much about this character crisis that we're in. They're such perfect examples of why our problems will never be solved. They simply will not be solved the way that we're going about them. It's not a matter of who we elect. It's not a matter of the laws we pass. It's a matter of character and of addressing those aspects of our culture, that foster and enable and even to a certain extent reward poor character. That's the problem. And until we do something about that, the problem will remain. All of our problems will remain because they're all related to it. It's not like we don't have enough laws. You know, back in the time when Jesus was on earth, Yeshua was born into a culture where there was a rule for everything. 200 and some laws governing almost every aspect of human behavior. And observant, faithful Jews were expected to obey every single one of these. And you were looked upon with disfavor for violating even the smallest one. And it was also believed that if you toe the line and you observed all these rules, all these laws, all these restrictions, that you would be blessed with many favors, that you would enjoy a good life, an abundant life. But we have millions of laws on the books. In fact, we have so many laws that at any given point in time, any one of us is probably in violation, without knowing it, of a half a dozen of them. There are just that many rules that we have created for ourselves. So if passing rules and regulations and laws were the solution to the problem, we should be living in a heaven on earth. This should be utopia. But it's not. And why isn't it? because human nature is human nature. And because human nature can't rise to the level of the greatness that we're capable of, we are capable. It can't rise to that level unless there are traditions and practices and norms and standards within our culture, within our environment, that not only foster good character, but dissuade bad character, so that good character thrives. And that will be the solution to our problems. Now, I know I've talked about this before, but it's worth talking about again because, you know, I'm a psychology professional. I have been a psychologist for almost 30 plus years. And it boggles my mind how little understanding folks have about the radically different time that people lived in when all of the major traditional theories about human nature were developed. Where Sigmund Freud, for example, came up with his ideas about what made people tick on a personality level. The Victorian times in which Freud lived were a tremendously socially repressive time. It was an era, as I've said before, and I say in several articles and mentioned in my books, it was an era in which if there were a slogan or a motto that would best describe the zeitgeist or the social atmosphere, the socio-cultural atmosphere of the times, that motto or slogan would be, "Don't even think about it." It was a very repressive time. People, as we were wont to say in the 60s, were quite hung up about just about everything. They had hang-ups, to be sure, hang-ups so strong and so unreasonable that they came down with illnesses that had no physical cause. They were literally worrying themselves sick, unreasonably. That can still happen, but it rarely does happen. Not these days. It doesn't happen very often. But in Freud's days, it happened a lot. And so Freud developed these theories about why these maladies occurred. And he explained what can happen when a person's basic instincts clashed against a repressive conscience and all kinds of anxiety develops. And then a person has to cope as best they can with that anxiety through certain coping mechanisms or certain defense mechanisms, so that they're not total nervous wrecks, and so they don't literally drive themselves insane. So Freud had all these great ideas, and they were wonderful. They were nearly poetic. He spent a lot of time made a substantial contribution to the field, examining quite closely what can go wrong when a person is literally sick with worry and with fret and with anxiety. But we live in a very different age. So the theories that Freud developed and others that followed him, the theories that they developed to explain human nature and explain human behavior and explain the psychological problems that people had, those theories, while they had a great deal of utility in those repressive times, they don't have any real utility these days. Our times are so radically different. I said that if there were a slogan or a motto or a saying that would capture the spirit or the zeitgeist or the socio-cultural atmosphere of the Victorian era, it would be, don't even think about it. But if there were such a slogan or motto or saying that would describe the atmosphere, the prevailing socio-cultural atmosphere of our time, the zeitgeist of our time, it would be just like the old Nike shoe commercial used to say, just do it. And because we live in such a more permissive, less repressive, more entitled sociocultural atmosphere, instead of having people overly hung up about literally everything and unreasonably hung up to boot, instead of that, we have among us far too many people who, for a lack of better terminology, are simply not hung up enough about enough things. In other words, when it comes to certain things that people used to give pause about, used to have some apprehensions about, used to have real trepidation about, folks today just do it. Even when the consequences of their behavior are negative and intense, because of the prevailing atmosphere of our time and because of the erosion of our character-building institutions, people don't have the internal strength and resources to resist caving into their primal urges. They just don't have the moral character. And that's what my work is all about, has been all about for all these years. Now, I know that there are plenty of you who know firsthand how this works. Know firsthand what it's like to be in a relationship with someone whose character is significantly flawed. How it is to work with someone like that, how it is to live with someone like that. And if you have questions or a story you want to share, or just some general comments you want to make, give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. Be happy to take your call. Well, I said that I was away and tuned into the news very infrequently. But a couple of things caught my eye. And it's just one thing I want to talk about. Like I've said before, and like most of you who listen to the program know, I don't take political points of view here. It's not what this show is about. The show is about restoring the greatness of our country by restoring the greatness of our communities, and restoring the greatness of our communities by restoring the greatness of our families, restoring the greatness of our families by restoring the character of the constituents of those families. Only character will save us. Only character will save us. So I don't take any political points of view on the show, but I cannot resist commenting on the endless parade of characters in the political arena who reveal so much, who have so much to teach us about the character crisis in which we're in. What a pathetic roster of individuals that we have wanting to sit in the chair of the most powerful office on the planet. It boggles my mind, with notable exceptions, with a couple of exceptions, I would say. I'm not even going to mention their names, but there are two candidates, one a female, one a male, who I think have at least some degree, some reasonable degree of character integrity. Now, I wish I could say that both of these individuals had all of the necessary experience and awareness and expertise to do the job. Otherwise, I'd have no problem voting for either one of them. I think maybe one female candidate is actually slightly better qualified because of her acumen with respect to business affairs and her awareness, at least of world affairs, seems to be fairly high. She's traveled the globe and is familiar with other cultures, et cetera, et cetera. She has a wealth of experience. But with those two notable exceptions, what a hopeless parade of clowns we have. It's a statement. It's a true statement of our problem. We created this problem. We allowed our sociocultural decay to reach a point that these are the characters that not only are we producing, but these are the kinds of characters that we're holding up as potential leaders for ourselves. We have only ourselves to blame. It's a sad, sad statement. But among those characters is one in particular that I want to talk about today. Just one matter, just because it's illustrative. You know, there's all this brouhaha over Benghazi and Hillary Clinton's email. And the reason is simple. One party wants to play gotcha. They want to prove two things. Just to feel vindicated. They want to prove two things. One, that the President of the United States and his Secretary of State and his spokespeople deliberately spun the news about Benghazi in such a way that it wouldn't make them look soft on terrorism immediately prior to the election. Why do they care? There's 100 reasons, probably why you could say, but it's just a thorn in their side, and they want to prove it. Are they going to be able to prove it? Well, not if the manipulators at work have their way, you know. And then the second thing they want to prove is that the way security was handled and the way the response was handled to the attack on our embassy was so inept that it needlessly cost the lives of our ambassador and some of his staff. So that's what they want to prove. And they want to hold somebody accountable. And they want it to look bad for the other party so that they can score political points. That's the agenda. Well, in our no-holds-barred, everybody fights and everybody fights dirty kind of culture, and everybody lies kind of culture, in that kind of environment, the sole task of the loyal opposition is to thwart every single attempt to get at the truth, because it might embarrass, it might disadvantage. And so the whole point of their even existence is to thwart the opposition. Isn't that a wonderful thing? So we have a case in point here in Mrs. Clinton, who, it doesn't take rocket science degree to figure this thing out. This was not a matter of convenience to have your own server for email and not use the government server. By the way, for those of you who think I don't know anything about what I'm talking about, I did for a period of time have my own state government email address when I was working with the state in various programs. There's a reason why folks who work for governmental agencies have these accounts. It's a matter of accountability. It's a matter of transparency. It's a matter of security. Confidentiality. And it doesn't take a PhD in rocket science to tell any reasonable person the real reason that Ms. Clinton wanted to have complete control of her account. And so the little piece of news that we got this week that confirms what I'm about to tell you just a little bit more is the fact that right from the get-go, she was so concerned about having her own server and having total control over it, that she actually paid a staffer, somebody who was already getting paid to be on the staff at the State Department, was already getting a check that you and I underwrite to do some other job at this agency. Ms. Clinton paid that person even more money to maintain and keep private her server with every bit of her correspondence, so it would be totally under her control. And so no one would be able to get at it for any reason. And even when she knew that people were looking for this information and subpoenaing people with the power to subpoena it, she tried to have it wiped clean. There's some who are saying that maybe she wasn't as successful as she thought. Wouldn't that be interesting? But my whole point of this, see, as I told you, I don't take political sides. My whole point in this is that this is the age in which we live. We live in this self-serving age where not only are there free-for-alls from one side, but also counterattacks from the other side. Nobody's going to be held accountable. It just also turned out the other little bit of news that came out of this revelation that a staffer who was already drawing a salary to do the job that they were paid to do at the State Department was getting money from Ms. Clinton to maintain this server. We're told that this person plans on taking the fifth if called to testify. Surprise, surprise, surprise. Oh my gosh. What a waste of time and energy and money to try and prove 2 points. You know, when you've got slick operators, and they're all slick operators, they know how to parse words, how to sidestep issues, how to dodge, how to bob and weave with the punches. These folks are extremely artful dodgers, extremely polished liars. It's their nature. It's their character. And that's the problem. That's the problem. That's how we got where we are. That's why families don't stay together. That's why communities are ripping apart. And that's why the country is at war with itself. We face two great enemies. One without, that's aligned with a radical ideology that is opposed to every single thing that our founding principles stand for. But then we have another enemy within. Our own internal conflict. And it arises out of the character crisis that we find ourselves in. The fact that we've created such an atmosphere of entitlement It's such an attitude of permissiveness and moral relativism that very few people have that internal moral compass necessary to be responsible. And it's costing us big time in every single aspect of our lives. As I said before, families fall apart. And that creates communities that are in disarray. When families fall apart, small communities fall apart. When communities fall apart, societies fall apart. That's the enemy that we have within. The character crisis that affects us all. And I see it as a greater threat in some ways than the external threat that we face from these radical ideologues whose stated agenda is to destroy us and our way of life, and those allies of ours who support a similar lifestyle. I see this character crisis as an even more dangerous threat, partly because it's so insidious, partly because the deterioration that we have seen and continue to see has been so incremental that it's been barely noticed, step by step, little by little, erosions here, erosions there. And in that process, we have created the greatest character crisis that we have ever had. And it has to be reversed. We're already paying way too dear a price, and we ain't seen nothing yet, as we are wont to say. It's going to get worse. Trust me on this. Any student of history can tell you these kinds of sociocultural phenomena, they go in cycles. They come and go in cycles. And we're in a pretty precarious one right now. Maybe you agree, maybe you don't. Maybe you think that things have always been just the way they are. Maybe you think that Armageddon is right around the corner. I don't know. Whatever your thoughts are, if you want to share them with us, give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. Once again, 718-717-8296. I do want to say one thing about this weekend, being Labor Day weekend. We have basically unions to thank for even creating this weekend, where we celebrate human labor. Celebrate the fact that we work pretty hard. As a matter of fact, even despite the changes, the drastic changes of the past 20 or 30 years in our sociocultural fabric, we are still the most productive society on earth. Americans, by and large, work longer and harder than any other group of individuals on the planet. We used to call that the Protestant work ethic, but it's more than that. It would be very unfair to call that ethic a Protestant work ethic, because so many immigrants came to this country from so many places and with so many different backgrounds, and they all brought with them that desire only to breathe free and that willingness to work and make their way, to have a free start in a fresh land, away from tyranny and repression, and a chance to thrive. Work hard, play by the rules, and thrive. That was the promise of America. That was the promise of Lady Liberty holding that torch of freedom in New York Harbor as the boats arrived. So it would be wrong to call that ethic a Protestant phenomenon. But we are still the most productive country on earth. We still have folks who work very hard. And on Labor Day, we celebrate that. We celebrate the fact that for the most part, most of our folks are decent, hard-working folks. They pay their dues, they take care of their families, do their best to take care of themselves and their families, and then they even find the resources to be generous to those in need, to give to charity. We're the most charitable country on the planet. We step up to the plate when there are disasters and when cries go out for aid. America steps up time and time again. So this is the weekend we celebrate the value of that four-letter word to so many disturbed and disordered characters among us. Yeah, that's right. The disturbed characters among us, those character disorders, those individuals who make you crazy, to them, the ultimate four-letter word is W-O-R-K. They don't like it. Now, it isn't that they won't put out effort. They will. Disturbed characters will put out effort. Just ask someone who has carefully and methodically planned some kind of drug enterprise or some kind of bank heist or whatever. Well, a lot of time and energy goes into these things, sometimes. So it isn't that they won't expend energy. The kind of work that I'm talking about that folks find distasteful is noble work. Work that benefits not just the individual, but work that has value for the common good, that serves the common good. And this is the weekend that we celebrate that. We celebrate where the real greatness of America has always been. I say this on my website, and I say this as a tagline when I describe the inspiration for the song that you hear playing at the beginning of the program and at its close. America's true greatness has never resided in its military might or its economic power. Lord knows we are one heck of a power militarily and economically. But that's not where our greatness lies. And it's not where it has ever lied. Not our true greatness. Our true greatness is in the character of our people. Our true greatness, when we are great, is because there are enough individuals among us of decent, moral character who work hard, who play by the rules, who honor values and ideals, and who promote those values and ideals to their children, teach them well, make a positive contribution. That's where the greatness of America has always been. And that's where it can be again. We're not over just yet. We don't get a handle on this character thing, it will be over. It really will be. And it isn't that we have to do anything about it politically. That's not the answer. We're not going to legislate our way out of this problem. It's not a legislative problem. We have more laws on the books now than we can count. They won't save us. But we can save ourselves. So, on this Labor Day weekend, as we enjoy the time with our family and friends, let's reflect a little bit on the value of an honest day's work. Not just the value of an honest day's work, but the nobility of it. The fact that we're willing to do what it takes, not only to provide for ourselves, but to make a contribution to the greater good. That's what we celebrate today. The average person who gets up every morning, puts on their shoes and socks, and goes to work. And not just work out there in the private sector or in the government sector collecting a check, not just the occupational kind of work, but goes to work, period. The work of raising a family, the work of building a community, the work of solidifying your civic organizations, your churches, whatever you're involved with. It's a noble thing, this work, and we celebrate it this weekend. We celebrate its value. We celebrate its nobility. That's what Labor Day, maybe it didn't completely start out that way, but that's what it's come to mean. And so we celebrate it. So we need to keep that in mind as we enjoy the time this weekend with family and friends, time off from the daily grind. And I'll see you again next week live on another edition of Character Matters. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Dr. George Simon. Have a good evening. Have a great weekend.